Welcome to the Texas Talks podcast. I'm your host, Brad Swale. Today I'm joined with Ken W. Good, a noted bail attorney and board member of the Professional Bondsmen of Texas, and who has worked closely with lawmakers, argued cases before the Texas Supreme Court. Among others, he's a father and author of Goods on Bail. Ken, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. This was, I don't think I've ever talked to a bondsman. I guess that's maybe
Or
that.
a bondsman attorney.
Or a bondsman attorney. I've never talked to a bondsman attorney, never had a bond. I guess I've been keeping my nose clean. So
Hey, that's
I'm glad
good.
I'm glad this is my first experience with this. Um, so I gave a very brief intro there. Would you like to I don't know, expand on that a little bit?
Well, I would probably say the most important thing you noted that I am a father of two girls. So I'm a father. I'm married to another attorney. So I made the terrible mistake 20 something years ago to marry somebody smarter than me so I don't get away with much crap. And I learned very early in our marriage, even though we're both attorneys, you don't cite case law to your wife in bed. That's not really helpful. And so I'd like to say I learned it really quick. I started out as an attorney over 30 something years ago, as representing doctors and hospitals when they got sued. I've always had an interest in appellate law, so appellate issues. That's why I like the legal issues. Um, I argued cases early on with the Supreme Court of Texas, and that was on a medical case, medical malpractice issue. And then I've argued cases before the Court of Criminal Appeals. That's the highest court in Texas for criminal issues, but they also regulate bail. So I've argued two cases before the Court of Criminal Appeals on bail and won both of those cases. I kind of got this interest in appellate stuff, and a bondsman got in trouble, and someone said, "Who do you hire for that?" And they said, "Well, you need an appellate attorney, and I know a really good one. You need to hire Ken Good." And so that's kind of what got me started down this road. And when I got interested in these legal issues, it's because someone asked me to attend a hearing in Harris County on a case called O'Donnell versus Harris County, and I went in and I just thought the judge was making the wrong decision. I think she was going down the wrong road. And so I came out and started setting off the alarm bells to the industry. It turned out to be one of the most important cases. And all these years later, I think I was proven right because the judge has been reversed 7, 8, or more times. And ultimately, the Fifth Circuit ruled that that case should have never been filed in federal court.
Yeah. Is that like a badge of honor to have to like make to argue the right way, and then the judge's decision goes the other way, and then they get overturned so many times?
Well, I don't know if it's a
Or
badge of honor. No, it's not a badge of honor. Let me tell you why. Because I tell clients if we have to spend the great sums of money that it takes to go up on appeal, we've already lost.
Yeah.
Because when you go to the Court of Appeals, if you're the appellant, you've already lost. And so you're just trying to save at something. And it costs a lot of money to do that. And so, when I'm telling clients about, okay, we're going into this big argument, here's your chance. But if we don't convince them, if we get a chance to settle for a little bit less than what we want, don't you want to do that instead of lose and then go up and spend 30, 40, $50,000 to go to the Court of Appeals? Even if you win, you've lost because you've spent that money.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're also a board member of the Professional Bondsmen of Texas, and that's an organization that I'm not super familiar with, to be honest. I don't think, again, this is my first time speaking with anybody in this field. What does the Professional Bondsmen of Texas do?
Well, I would say we're a clique. No, we're not. We're a trade organization. We like to say that we're the voice of the bail industry in Texas. So I would say that we provide resources. We are a resource to legislators and to the public to educate them on these types of issues. You have a judge that's going down the wrong road, and nobody is telling the story that we think is the correct story. So I think without us, you would not be hearing probably the side of the story that needs to be told. The bail bond world is very closely aligned with the criminal justice system. So, what's good for the criminal justice system is usually good for the bail industry. And what's bad for the criminal justice system is usually bad for the bail industry. So, we are, like in Texas, probably, if you looked at the latest bail report from OCA, which is the Texas Office of Court Administration, they would say 80 something percent of all releases in Texas are on a private surety bond. I don't think that number is accurate, but but for our purposes, we could say the number one way people are released from jail in Texas is on a private surety bond, and that's important because that's what get cases resolved more quickly
Now,
than any other type of release.
clarify what type of bond that is.
It, it's what we think of as a bail bond.
Okay.
In Texas, we have three types of release. We have release on a bail bond, a private surety bond, cash bond, whereas instead of paying a premium and have the bonding company post the bond, you're posting the total cash amount of the bond with the court. And then the third thing that Texas recognizes is a personal bond. Sometimes we call it personal recognizance bond, but in Texas, it's really a personal bond. And a personal bond is a simple release mechanism where we're just requiring your promise that you will return. And, before all these reforms were enacted, we had all these activists arguing, oh, we don't need the private surety bail system. Everybody wants to resolve their case and everybody will come back. Well, I think we learned very quickly during COVID that's not true. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got some statistics from Harris County and from California that says release on a personal bond has an 80% failure to appear rate. And, criminal cases can't go forward without you. They have to be put on hold because of your constitutional rights. So if you don't come and your case gets put on hold, then we just get a bigger and bigger backlog of cases. And that's what causes problems in the criminal justice system.
Yeah, so you brought up Harris County there, and they recently, I guess, had a forum talking about some of the things that they've been doing around how should I say, criminal justice, I guess, the criminal system, saying that it's working.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? What did they
Well,
say, and what do you say?
um, Well, so we've already talked about the O'Donnell case, which was ultimately reversed, and the Fifth Circuit said it should have never been filed.
Okay.
But at one point, the county entered into a settlement of that case, saying we're going to use simple release, personal bonds, for most misdemeanors in Harris County. And so they've kind of been following this, where they're just releasing everybody on their promise to come back. And so we've been having these dueling reports about whether it's working. We first have the whole issue of why are they following a settlement when the Fifth Circuit has reversed the case and said that it should have never been filed in state court. Well, they're following it because the local politicians want to follow it. They refuse to even approach the court to set it aside. And then we have these dueling reports. The district attorney issued a report saying it's not working. And so the moderator, which is the county, filed a report saying, oh, it's great. It's working great. And then we would have every 6 months a new report issued. I think the reason why they had the forum in the last few days is because crime is a big issue. It's a big issue in Harris County. It's a big issue in the district attorney's race because we have one DA who's supported by George Soros, who's a big anti-establishment or law and order supporter for him. And so we've discovered that there's a lot of quid pro quo. If he gets elected, he will be expected to do a lot of things which are really bad for the criminal justice system. And so my criticism of this forum is they don't acknowledge that there's counter reports saying that it's not working. There's no acknowledgement that the district attorney has said they're wrong and that recidivism is much higher and that what they're doing is causing crime to increase. They just live in almost Oz. They have this everything's working, kumbaya, kumbaya, and they will not acknowledge anything else.
I mean, it seems like if the DA is saying that it's not working, it's the DA that I don't know who has more credibility on the issue than the DA. That's all.
Well, yeah, but what happened to the DA after she said that? In the primary in March, she was defeated. She was defeated overwhelmingly with a George Soros supported candidate in the primary. So
Yeah.
she was attacked unmercifully by her party for taking that position, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, some of that happens. I live in Travis County. Some of that happens here too,
Mhm.
with our DA. And I mean, people are, from what I hear, and I've experienced some of this personally as well, that, crime is certainly up. Like it feels up, and people hear more stories of crime, whether from friends or newspapers or whatever. They hear it, but then people turn around and they say, no, crime is not up. It's actually flat or down. And if you look at it historically, yada yada yada, right? But there's a feeling with the people that something's not right. But what does the data show?
Well, for the last couple of years, crime has been one of the big issues in the last national election and now. I would say that one party has been arguing crime's not up. Just look at the FBI statistics. They show crime is actually down. So you're just really talking about a perception versus reality. And so stay the course. Everything's going great. The problem is, in the last few weeks, the FBI has released new numbers, and shockingly, they show that crime is up, and so, but it's now a little bit more consistent with all the other federal agencies that monitor crime. So the CDC monitors homicides. They show that's up 20%. The DOJ does an annual survey that they've been doing for decades, and it shows crimes up substantially. I mean, we don't even talk about looking at car theft statistics because, I think they're the most accurate because insurance policies or insurance companies still will not pay off a claim for a carjacking or theft of a vehicle without a police report. And those statistics show that car thefts are up dramatically. And so, what I would say is the only thing that one party has pointed to support their argument that crime is down is the FBI statistics. And that's been for the last 2 or 3 years. Now that that's been blown out of the water. And so the problem is now they just want to change the subject. I mean, I'm not hearing anything from the left on crime right now. All you hear now is Trump is Hitler, because they can't talk about crime anymore. That has been their only argument, and now it's been taken away from them. So they just are going to focus on Trump is Hitler until a week from yesterday.
Yeah. Yes, a week from
Is
yeah,
it a week from today?
a week from today. Yeah.
Ooh, a week from
That's okay.
today.
It
I've
flies
already
by,
voted. So.
man. This is the time of every 4 years things just sort of it all gets mixed up. That's fine. So yeah, and also, I mean, I remember reading in different places, and I'm wondering what your thought on this is. That some of those statistics the FBI previously had were, and maybe this is what changed, that some police departments across the country were not sharing information with FBI. And so it artificially lowered it. The national statistics were down, but I'm just picking on a place. I don't know if this is one of them. New Orleans wasn't giving crime stats to the
Well,
FBI.
what happened is like 4 or 5 years ago, the FBI changed the way they gathered crime statistics. So they changed to a new system. And so you had to buy the new system to be able to integrate it so that your crime stats would be reported to the FBI. And so there was a lot of organizations, and including, the two biggest law enforcement uh, groups in the state, New York and LA, weren't even reporting to them because they had bought the equipment. And so that's been part of the problem. You could argue that the reason why the statistics changed, it wasn't nefarious. It's just more police agencies came online with
Yeah.
the new system, and so they updated the statistics with what they had, and it came up with the result that increased. Or you could say it was nefarious and say that the FBI was afraid that Trump was going to win, and so they wanted to update those before the election. I have no evidence of either way.
Sure.
Either one could be absolutely correct. The only thing I have to point to say it could be nefarious is timing. But I was told one time by somebody, never give an ill intent when stupidity will cover it, and
Sure.
so
Yeah.
stupidity would cover this.
Yeah, it certainly would. And of course, I have no idea which way which way it's supposed to be or which way the truth goes. But either way, we're here where we are today, and let's work with what we got.
But we still have scientists that say that the FBI statistics are incomplete and that it would be reasonable to say they're not accurate at this point because
Accurate in
people
which
are,
direction? They're not accurate in which direction? They're too
and
low?
that they're incomplete. Yeah. If they're incomplete, they're low because police agencies are still converting over
Yeah.
to this new system. Until that's complete, they're going to be low.
Yeah. All the carjackings from the insurance agencies, that those reports, is that why insurance is going up so much, or part of it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
If we're not going to prosecute car thefts, we're going to have to pay for those in another way. I mean, it's like, you know, I mean, when we tell police they can't police, that's going to have an impact on our insurance policy. Same thing as when we quit doing anything about theft under $950 in California.
Yeah.
Companies can't withstand $25,000 a day in shoplifting, so they start closing up, or they can't make a profit anymore. Well,
Yeah.
those are all going to have an impact on the rest of the businesses. I mean, the biggest impact we see that we don't even think about is commercial property values. I mean, we've got commercial properties in San Francisco that have sold for 30 to 50% of their value from 2 or 3 years ago. We have two properties in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is an inner city problem of itself, sold for 9% of its value from the last time it sold. So not taking care of crime, not addressing crime will impact commercial property values, and that impacts the taxes that our urban cities will be able to collect. And it can snowball. Default rates on commercial properties gone from 5% to 40 something percent now, and that's going to impact taxes.
So we've talked about, we've talked sort of like as big picture, right? And we've touched a little bit on Harris County. I want to kind of zoom in on Texas, and
Mhm.
I know you're not necessarily here to talk about commercial real estate, but I that's a story here in Austin quite a bit that these commercial real estate buildings are having a hard time filling up. Um, but you're more, and I guess you may have an opinion on that. But let's talk about crime. What is the overall picture of crime in Texas? Are we one of the states that sort of took too long to get online? Are our numbers accurate? Are they low? Are they high? What's going on?
Well, okay, so I think you can separate crime in Texas to, are you in a conservative area or are you in a liberal area? Like
Okay,
Austin and Houston are going to be more liberal areas,
sure.
and they're going to have prosecutors that are going to decide we're not going to prosecute certain crimes. That's why Texas enacted a law that says if a DA says they're no longer going to prosecute certain class of crimes,
Yeah.
that they can be moved from office. So they're trying to address that. Other than those two areas, I think by and large Texas has done a great job on its bail reform movement. They've gone the opposite direction of our urban areas across the country. They've strengthened the criminal justice system. So they, number one, limited the use of personal bonds for violent offenses. And then they have required judges to review criminal histories before setting bail. And then they've done some training for judges on the issue of setting bail.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about the personal bond, right? That's just the
Mhm.
promise to come back, right?
Yes, sir.
And you know, I would think that there are times when that's an appropriate tool to use, right? When I don't know, maybe it's a pretty low minor crime. There's not a huge flight risk. The person doesn't have a lot of money, and maybe that's an appropriate time to use something like that. Yeah,
I'd think that a first time offender, absolutely, it can be considered, but you have to keep in mind that release on a personal bond has a lot higher failure to appear. I
sure.
mean, less than 10% for the private industry, at least 50, 60, or, in Harris County, according to Harris County Court Watch, there's an 80% failure to appear on personal bonds. So, I mean, the type of bond you select or the type of release has an impact on the defendant's being success ratio, because these are problem children, they need to have their hand held. But what we're forgetting is the criminal justice system was intended to be an individualized system. When you're arrested, we're supposed to take into consideration your personal situation. When I'm arrested, we're supposed to take into consideration my personal situation. They are always going to be different.
Sure.
But if neither one of us have a criminal history, in Texas, just like almost anywhere else, you're not going to be held.
Yeah.
The problem we have, like in Harris County, you're released on a personal bond, you fail to show up, you get arrested, you get a new personal bond, you fail to show up, you get a new personal bond, you fail to show up, you get a new personal bond, sometimes 16, 17 times. Now, what happens is you people stop holding people accountable. And I think you and I would agree that, I mean, there's a point in time where you shouldn't get a personal bond again. I think
Of course.
one time, if you fail to show up, you shouldn't get another one.
Yeah,
But
I think that sounds reasonable. Yeah.
yeah, but 5, 6, 17, we all would agree that that's too much.
No, of course. Well, we all there's apparently some people that don't agree, but yes,
Well,
I think a reasonable person would agree. The question that I was going to ask is, what do you think, if this is an appropriate tool at times, right? When there's, it's first time
hmm
offender,
hmm
whatever. Um, and the way that it's being abused now, 16, 17 times, repeat offenders going out committing more crimes, another personal bond, as you've described. Does it give personal bonds a bad name, and does it risk them not being a tool in the toolbox in the future for people that actually need it?
No, because I think a personal bond should be limited in their use to begin with
Sure.
because of the high failure to appear rate. But I would say that let's change our example.
Okay.
Now judges are required to review criminal histories before setting bail. And so now when I'm arrested, I have a substantial criminal history. I've been arrested 6 times in the last 2 years. Well, okay, the judge takes that in
I
consideration
don't
and
remember
says,
saying that in my intro, Ken.
well, it's a secret. Only my wife knows. And so we put that into the consideration. And so the judge sets a higher bond, and now it's one I can't afford.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is, I would argue that I'm no longer in jail because I can't afford the bond. I'm in jail because of my criminal history.
Yeah.
But we have people, and in Harris County, they would argue you can't set bail at an amount they say they can't afford. Even though the Fifth Circuit has rejected that argument, they still are trying to push that as the narrative in Harris County. Well, we can't set bail at an amount they can't afford. That's what we agreed in the O'Donnell case. Wait a minute, that was reversed. But they still do it. And so that's the reason why they say, well, we have to release them 17 times because we can't hold them accountable. Yes, absolutely you can, and that's the purpose of bail. If they can't perform their promise to return to answer the criminal charges, you can hold them accountable for doing that. And
Yeah.
that's what's happening. Politics is preventing that in certain areas. And I would say Travis County is one of them and Harris County is another.
Sure. So, the you mentioned earlier the DA's sort of, I guess, refusing to prosecute. I want to
Mhm.
ask you what that does to crime statistics, if anything. I don't know. Are the crime statistics based on arrests or are they based on prosecutions or both?
Well, I think both because we're starting to see a large number of unresolved crime, which then pushes up the numbers of crimes that are not reported because the public doesn't believe that they're going to, anything will be done. But
Yeah.
there's a great story about the difference between one county over another because the Montgomery County Police Department or county sheriff's office posted a story on Facebook about somebody they arrested, and it involved catalytic converter theft.
Yeah.
And Harris County they've taken the position that it's a low level crime, even though, career criminals, organized crimes figure out ways to make thousands of dollars off of one catalytic converter. It's just a low level crime. So we don't want to prosecute anymore. So 2 guys were arrested and for catalytic converter theft, and they were taking them to jail. And the guys were like, wait a minute, guys, this isn't the way to the Harris County jail. And they're like, oh, no, you slipped over into Montgomery County
Yeah.
and we arrested you here and we prosecute this crime in Montgomery County. And so you're going to the Montgomery County jail. And the guys were very upset. And, there's now a billboard on a county line between Harris County and Montgomery County that says, this is Montgomery County. We support law enforcement and we prosecute crime. Now, that's a huge statement about what's going on in Harris County.
Yeah. Yeah, I would imagine so. There might be a billboard on all of the county borders there. Maybe there should be. So, the I guess more blue counties in Texas, blue cities, big cities, of course. I mean, big cities all across the United States they generally lean left. I think Fort Worth may be an exception to that rule, but I'm curious, sort of, the big picture of crime in Texas and the trends in Texas. We are not immune to DAs that have a political ideology that restorative justice, that sort of thing here in Texas. It happens.
Yeah, but Texas is limited
Sure.
to that because Texas has always been a conservative state.
Yeah.
Even when Texas was a Democrat state, it was a conservative Democrat state. And I would argue the only reason why it's a Republican state now and solely a Republican state is because um, the Democrats don't have room for conservatives anymore. And so I think that is limited across the state. I mean, in Dallas, Crusoe, who's the DA there, started out with a similar policy like they were doing in LA, and I mean, quickly retracted on it and withdrew it because the public won't stand for that here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it seems like the public might be standing for it a little bit, but
Well,
um,
they're not standing for it in California because they have Proposition 34 on the ballot in November to roll back almost all of the provisions for we won't prosecute crime under $950. So even crazy California is not standing for it.
yeah. So the crime trends in Texas, I mean, pre-COVID, I'm thinking about my own personal experience here in Travis County and, paying attention to the news very closely here. Pre-COVID, the
Hmm.
total murders were, a couple dozen, maybe 3 dozen, whatever. And then it shot up and we broke a record after COVID. And then it's kind of come down the murder rate, or the total murders here in Austin. But
Still
it's
higher than it
still
was.
higher than it was. And people sort of claim that as a victory. Well, it's coming down, right?
No, I mean, I would argue that's because they did all these simple release mechanisms. And, we've already talked about what that does on chaos, decriminalizes crime, puts pressure on it, and that's
Sure.
seen as a green light to commit more crime. But I would say, what's the trend statewide? Harris County was saying crime's down, and they had a big press conference about it. And then a few months later, they had another press conference to announce that they had just discovered that they had closed 260 something thousand criminal cases with the notation lack of personnel. And so the police chief for Houston ended up resigning, or he was going to be fired over it.
Yeah.
So I think when you take those statistics into when you take those into consideration, I would say crime in Harris County is no more than flat, probably up. And so we still have a crime issue going on in Houston. That's mostly because of their local policies and the way that they're pushing politics. I mean, look, historically, all politicians, Republican, Democrat, have been anti-crime, especially in Texas, since
Of
it's been a
course.
conservative state. But for some reason, we're repeating this cycle that we did in the 60s, where we felt safe, we were more forgiving on our criminal laws, crime went up. And then when crime started going up, we had a fight among the politicians. One side of the political debate refused to engage, refused to be involved in resolving it. That ended up in having a backlash, and we got Reagan with the war on drugs. We're kind of in the middle of that again. I would say the pendulum has swung much further to the left this time because of advocacy groups that have just so much money. And right now, the pendulum has not swung back to the right because of other issues like identity politics with the issue of abortion in the last two elections.
Sure.
And so we're fixing to see whether the pendulum is going to start swinging to the right again, just on the issue of crime. I think crime is still a problem, but we're getting to the point where it's a conservative or liberal issue where crime in liberal areas is treated differently than crimes in conservative areas, and we're seeing the benefits and the detriments of that in those local communities.
Yeah. So, you're talking about the pendulum swing, and I think that's always an interesting theory of when it happens. And, I think there's certainly historical record to show that it does happen. Is there, because of the way that things are going, is there a risk that the pendulum swings too far?
Yes, absolutely. And where we're seeing that across the country and in Texas is a push for more preventative detention. I think some of these pushes on when the pendulum went way far to the left, the push was we're going to tie the hands of the judges. And we made this whole list of crimes that says if you're charged with this, you just get released on simple release. Texas, it would be released on a personal bond. But it's a charge-based release system where no matter how many times you get accused of that crime, you get the same treatment.
Yeah.
And instead of individual based, okay, you've been arrested 3 times for this crime in the last 6 months. You're not eligible for simple release anymore.
Yeah.
Well, the opposite, this pendulum swing in the opposite direction, it is we're going to hold more people. We're going to preventatively detain more people before trial. And they also do it on a charge based scheme where if you're charged with murder, you get detained.
Yeah.
Um, and I think both extremes have the same risk. The public crime is going to increase with when we go to the left side of the spectrum, and the public won't put up with that. On the right, the public is not willing to pay to detain. Like, the federal system has, they reformed it 25 years ago. And, at the time we were detaining about 25% of the people released, and it is a release or detain system. But now in 2024, we detain about 74%, 75% of the people arrested in the federal system, and they're detained until trial. We can't afford a system in Texas where we detain 75% of the people who are arrested.
Yeah.
And the public won't pay for that. And so we have to look for the middle ground. I talk to my friends on the left and I say, y'all can influence how far the spectrum goes on the right, or how far the pendulum swings on the right, because compromise will prevent that. But we've got a constitutional amendment that will be on proposed for the third legislative session, seeking to extend and allow more preventative detention for violent offenses.
As the Texas Supreme Court?
It'll be proposed at the legislature. In the past two sessions, it has not passed out of the legislature because it has to get a two-thirds vote out of both the House and the Senate, and then it
Okay.
has to go before the voters. In the last two sessions, it did not get voted out of it didn't get the required vote out of the House.
Yeah.
And with the climate, we've got this whole scenario or a whole climate in the House that we don't know how it's going to play out over the speaker's race. And so we could have a very interesting legislative session in the House this time, where even the Republicans are not getting along, or if we don't have any Democrat chairs, where the Democrats won't agree to anything, so they're not going to agree to any constitutional amendment. So
Yeah. I
it's
would
going to be
argue
very
that
interesting.
every session is pretty interesting, but yeah, maybe
Well,
this.
the last session, I mean, usually the Republicans get along amongst
Yeah.
themselves, but I've never seen it like the last session where we have this impeachment and then it goes to the Senate and it's
Yeah.
treated completely differently. And um, then we've got the governor and we've got a sitting attorney general targeting Republicans in primaries over two reasons. Either they support impeachment or they support or did not support vouchers. And that's just been incredible. The inter-party fighting, but it really, the question is, I don't know if it's going to really have a big impact on the general election. I don't think any Republicans are going to lose their seats because of that inter-party fighting.
Yeah. So just to sort of recap the crime here in Texas, it seems like it's maybe, I mean, it may be higher than COVID, pre-COVID, higher than pre-COVID, but it's maybe sort of flatlining a little bit in Texas.
Well, I would say, especially in some of our, like Dallas, Houston, Austin, and probably Bexar County and San Antonio, where we've had these pushes by our advocates for change. But I think the legislature has really righted the ship
Yeah.
and put in some really strong criminal justice reforms and bail reforms that have that strengthen criminal justice instead of weaken it.
Yeah. So I mean, I know that you've worked with lawmakers in the past, and you are a board member of the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. Do you have plans of, working up at the Capitol this coming 89th session, speaking with them, pushing for more reforms, strengthening different things, and what might that look like?
Well, yes, and it's what is it, October? I mean, we're a week away from the election, which we already
Yeah.
mentioned. And so we're in the process of meeting with, stakeholders about the next legislative session. I've already met with the staff for the governor's office on criminal justice issues. We're in the process of setting up meetings with other uh, stakeholders. I mean, Pete Flores is the new chairman of the Criminal Justice Committee on the Senate side. We have a meeting with him coming up. Senator Huffman, who is the most powerful senator in the state, she's chairman of the Finance Committee, but she also carries most of the criminal justice bills. She was the author of SB 6, and she's a former judge, so she's very knowledgeable. She doesn't really need to lean on anybody. She knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And so we have a lot of those types of issues going on right now, preparing for the session. One of the bills that, I think we are talking about proposing is there's a statute called 1716 of the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure, which if someone comes to us and says, bail me out of jail, and they've told us that they're here legally, but they're not, and so almost like we got tricked, well, then they get released from jail, but they immediately get turned over to ICE.
Yeah.
And so ICE will deport them. Well, if they get deported, the bondsman is going to be responsible for the full bond, but also the victim's going to be denied justice. And so the current statute was amended a few years ago to say bondsmen can't present a 1716 to get a warrant to bring them back if they're tricked. Didn't say trick, but you can do it if they went to ICE custody. So we've proposed repealing that so that we can bring people back and get justice when they lie to us. I mean, we're not here to help somebody escape the jurisdiction of Texas
Yeah.
and or the United States. We're just getting them out of jail so that we're saving the cost to the county and getting them back to court to resolve their criminal case. So we're not helping them escape And I don't think the governor really intended for that to be the purpose. So I've asked the governor's office to consider allowing us to repeal that, and with the hope that they will not veto it if it does, because I think it was part of their it was a part of a bill that they proposed years ago, Sanctuary Cities bill.
Yeah.
And the reason why it was proposed, it was an amendment to it to try to bring the bail industry in to oppose the bill. We didn't oppose the bill, and so now we're being punished. And I think that's probably one of the only parts of the bill that finally went into effect until the Fifth Circuit ruled on it. So, I mean, so we have lots of irons in the fire because usually, we're always looking for ways to improve the criminal justice system and improve the bail system. It's just we're also fighting misinformation all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ken Good, board member of the Professional Bondsmen of Texas, I appreciate you taking the time. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Is there a website or social media that you wanted to plug?
Sure. If you want more information about our organization, you could go to pbtx.com. We have a blog there where we highlight important criminal justice stories, but we also have our own podcast, and it's called The Bail Post. There's a link on our menu, or you can just go to thebailpost.com, where all we do is talk about criminal justice issues. So we want to educate legislators, also the public, on what are these issues. If you want to know what the New Jersey plan is, we have an episode all about it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, great. We'll put the links down in the description below. Ken Good, I really appreciate you taking time.
Thank you very much.